You've likely seen a lot of trailers, gameplay, and previews for Dragon's Dogma 2, Capcom's next open-world action RPG, set in a fantasy world with massive monsters to slay, a variety of class vocations to play, a large open world to explore with plenty of secrets to uncover. Well, this is a title many of us fans of the original game have been waiting over a decade for, but with such high expectations, hype, and love for this IP, you may think you're ready for Dragon's Dogma 2, but let me tell you, it probably isn't going to be everything you're expecting, and I do mean this in several ways. Essentially, it's not what we thought. So, get ready because we have a lot to talk about, and I feel very passionate about this game and its world. Of course, thanks to Capcom, we were able to play the game in advance to bring you this complete review. Myself, Paradise, and 269 together have sunk in well over 100 hours combined, and both completely finished the game and its endgame content. As a huge fan of Capcom games and Dragon's Dogma in general, I feel strongly about this game both in terms of its positives and negatives. I want to convey in this review everything I love about the title and the things that I wish were improved. So, I'm aware of my bias going into this, but I do feel I can fairly go over the various elements from its story, world, combat, vocations, and more, pointing out all of the things that I would have wanted to know without including any spoilers. So with this in mind, we will be using early game footage and official trailers only. Of course, we won't go into detail on any spoilers or story plots, so you can enjoy this review without a worry, as per usual with our review and impression videos. So let's go over the game as a whole and what you can expect for it, because honestly, our expectations were fairly off with what we thought the game would be and then what we actually got to experience. Dragon's Dogma 2 is about becoming and following the destiny of being an Arisen. This is a powerful being whose heart was stolen by the dragon, and whom is destined to journey through the world with the help of our pawns, your mysterious AI companions, as you go through helping the inhabitants of the land, slaying monsters, and ultimately challenging the dragon in one way or another. There's nuances and choices to make along the way, but essentially you will be thrown into this world, which is split into large areas as you explore, battle, quest, and try out the game's various vocation classes, each with their own unique playstyle. Now here's the thing, this game does not hold your hand, and it shouldn't. It's part of the experience, as the game is largely about doing things your own way, how you choose to tackle encounters, and the choices you make. There's a nice level of customization from your gear, vocation, your main pawn, and your pawn party members that you can hire from other players around the world. The character creator is fantastic and gives you many options to make all kinds of crazy characters and creatures. For example, my player character is modeled after Geralt of Rivia from The Witcher series, while my main pawn is modeled after Daenerys Targaryen from Game of Thrones. I do, however, wish the gameplay customization was a bit deeper, with more deep RPG systems fleshed out to improve your playstyle and character and make them a bit more unique with a bit more control. You can choose your gear, your augments, your class vocation, and the skills you take, but that is mostly it. It feels adequate, but doesn't really push the boundaries, and this is a reoccurring theme across many aspects of Dragon's Dogma 2. The game can be brutal at first as you're figuring out the controls, how your class is played, and how the various monsters behave. We think new players to the series will have a particularly rough start, meanwhile experienced players will likely feel at home. However, after this initial struggle of learning the controls and mechanics, because the game doesn't really tell you about them, you have to figure it out for the most part, we found that the game, well, was significantly easier than we were expecting, especially after our previews, where we found the monsters to be quite strong, likely due to the tuning of those demo builds. In Dragon's Dogma 1, the monsters were fairly tanky and strong. Death was a somewhat common occurrence until you learnt their moveset and weaknesses. In Dragon's Dogma 2, the monsters, while spectacular and very cool to fight, I really do enjoy fighting them, they do feel, well, easier. They take a lot of damage pretty quickly, they never really one-shot you even when I made some pretty bad mistakes, and it had me questioning, am I just this good, or is the game just a bit easier than anticipated? On one hand, I expect the game's difficulty will be hard for a casual player. It might be just right for an average gamer, and on the easier side for more advanced hardcore fans of the series, and so I just wanted to set expectations about how these fights were for me. That's not to say I didn't get my face smashed in by many enemies, I just never got to the point where I was actually dying from, well, pretty much anything. And if you do die, you have the Wake Stones to revive you, which are surprisingly more common than they were in the original. For example, in my complete playthrough, I died and used a Wake Stone only 3 times. 2 out of 3 of these deaths were from falling off of a high place and just instant dying. One of them was from the literal last monster you fight in the endgame. But a game's difficulty is of course subjective. I was just surprised given my experience with the first Dragon's Dogma game and how I felt this game was substantially easier. Next, let's talk about the open world and the length of the game. The game is set in a fantasy RPG world that personally I've really enjoyed. From the rolling green hills of Vermund to the canyonous areas of Battahl and many things to explore and discover in between, it is a journey and a world that you can get lost in, enjoy the views of various vistas, and it feels like a real adventure. The game does feel bigger than the original, and they estimated in the marketing it's around 4 times larger, but I will say it doesn't feel 4 times larger to me. It's quite spread out and not everywhere is accessible. There is a lot of exploring and things to find, but it's just not as massive as I was expecting. The difference between day and night is quite vast, with night being very dark and dangerous and day being a more traditional and thrilling fantasy experience. There's goblins littered throughout the land, wolves who hunt in packs, mercenaries to fight, harpies attacking from the sky, Sauron lizard men who love to ambush you, the odd slime to stand on, and undead at nighttime. This is all great, but this is pretty much the extent of the variety of normal-sized mobs you encounter. Of course, you then have large monsters that you can battle, and each one has its own identity, weaknesses, and tactics. From the Cyclopses to the Ogres, Griffins, and Chimeras, and more, there is a range of monsters, but again, the variety isn't as much as you might be expecting, and it does feel less than the original, which is kind of odd. The fights themselves are extremely fun and engaging though. You feel awesome when slaying a large monster in style with the game's various class vocations. However, this is another aspect of the game where once again it feels adequate and safe, but doesn't exceed expectations. I think this is then where the game's story length comes into question, because after around 20 hours, you get used to the vast majority of encounters, and the more you fight, the stronger you get, so these fights start to become more trivial and easy, making us just breeze through a lot of the game's content without too much of a struggle, which is something we didn't expect first going in. Honestly, we didn't expect to actually finish the game in the time we had, yet both myself, a vet from the first game, and 2six, a new player to Dragon's Dogma 2, have both fully completed it and the endgame. Furthermore, we played in 2 different playstyles. I, as a massive fan, took my time, did some side quests, enjoyed exploring and experimenting. Meanwhile, 2six progressed with the goal of beating the game and doing the odd side quest as desired. My playthrough came in at 43 hours, while 2six's came in at around 35 hours. I think the game can be completed much faster than this and much slower, depending on your playstyle and knowledge at what to do at various points, because again, the game doesn't hand feed you all of the objectives. But to be honest, I was kind of shocked. No, I didn't 100% complete every side quest, but I would say I did around 80 to 90% of them, and there's also monsters that you could completely miss, and I encountered all of them too. There's even the additional hybrid vocations to unlock, and once again, I've unlocked all of them as well. I think I was expecting the game to be significantly bigger than it is, and I've been trying to think why. Is it because it's been so long since the first game? Is it because more recent RPGs have been pretty massive? Or maybe because of the marketing showing a massive sprawling world that's 4 times bigger than the original? We know that the game's director Itsuno has repeatedly said that this is their true vision for Dragon's Dogma and what they wanted the first game to be, and that's when it hit me. This is their vision for Dragon's Dogma. It wasn't a vision to create a massive new sequel that exceeds expectations and blows everyone away. This is the true version of what they wanted the original to be, and well, that's what it is. Again, it is a safe and adequate length and experience that I did enjoy. It's just not one that will blow you away with hundreds and hundreds of hours of content, although you could definitely play it for that long. This isn't to say it wasn't one hell of a ride and a game that I've thoroughly enjoyed and will play through again. It's just not as big and as deep as I think many people will want it to be, especially if you're more of a hardcore gamer or a die-hard fan of the first game and have been waiting 12 years since the original. I will, however, caveat this and say we have fully completed the game and its endgame content, and the game does have a lot of choices and variations to different quests and events, leading us to think there might be more secrets to discover, which could dramatically increase your playtime, including the fact that there is New Game Plus. Next, let us touch on the voice acting, music, and questing. The questing in the game is done particularly well. Quests are something you almost discover naturally as you journey and explore. more. NPCs come up to you asking for your help or telling you something interesting, and this is the way the game gives you new quests for the most part. You feel very present in the world, and visiting areas at different times of day will mean different people will be there, so different quests become available. We really like this system, and the quests themselves a lot of the time don't just tell you exactly what to do and where to go. You have to read, listen, and figure out what to do with common sense and logic. For us, this is a breath of fresh air and we love it. That being said, the vast majority of quests, unfortunately, didn't give you especially rewarding items and gear for the most part, with many quests giving you a chunk of money and then a forgettable item or consumable. So I never really felt like I encountered a quest that really stood out because of the reward. The voice acting in the game, I would say, could be better. It is, however, part of the game's charm having quirky and unique accents with different voices and voice lines, with a majority of the game's VO being in ye olde English kind of style. Personally, I quite like it, but for some it's going to be grating. The variety of voices also isn't that impressive, and at times it feels like it's the same 5 people or so voicing everything, and that is a bit of a letdown. On the other hand, the music does not disappoint. It's immersive, at times spectacular, and is iconic to the original, especially with the fanfare when defeating larger monsters. Some boss fights exceed expectations in terms of the musical score, and this really elevates the game and the enjoyment of the combat. Next, I'll briefly talk about the game's class vocations, as this is a core system to how you play and customize your character, as well as combat in general. We have broken down each vocation on the channel already, so I won't waste time and go over each one. But I will say they all play very differently and each one is very fun. I was very pleased starting as the fighter and felt like a real soldier and had impact on my strikes. I loved maxing out the archer, getting a different perspective on the battles from afar, and loosing various powerful arrow combinations. And ultimately, I felt like a true main character when getting the Mystic Spearhand, a class that feels tailor-made to this game and its combat mechanics. Each vocation feels different, fun, and worth trying, and this is a core feature from the first game that I think many people will enjoy. But there wasn't really too much left to discover after the game's marketing, as there was no massive surprises along the way. Something that a lot of players will likely be disappointed in is the fact that some vocations you can get very early, while others will not naturally unlock until much later in the story. So depending on what you were excited to play, such as the returning fan favorite, the Magic Archer, you might find you can't play this until 20 or 30 plus hours in, unless you especially beeline and bypass a lot of barriers to get there early, which is very unlikely for a first playthrough without prior knowledge. So in terms of the vocations, they are very fun and feel great, but we knew what we were getting and we got them. Again, it's kind of safe and adequate, but not mold breaking. It would have been nice to see some hidden vocations or some things not shown in the game's marketing, especially with the game's fleshed out system of the vocation meisters to learn from. The combat is what it's all about in Dragon's Dogma 2. You feel like a true badass when you critically strike an enemy, there's impact on many moves, and getting a new powerful skill to try out is genuinely thrilling. The returning system of clinging and climbing on monsters is of course present and feels great. It's probably a feature in the game that we love most. Climbing around on monsters and bringing them down just never feels old. Honestly, overall the combat felt great, but then you have your pawns, your AI party companions. Honestly, with the amount of varied terrain and different combinations of vocations, they've done a very good job. They're capable, helpful, and at times hilarious. Their voice lines didn't grate on me too much, and while there are repeated phrases, they aren't quite as frequent as in the original. Overall, I actually really love the pawns and think they did an amazing job with them. Their AI, their voice lines and behavior, overall they're very impressive and they really add to the charm of the game. Now let's go over the game's performance, graphics and platforms. I've been lucky enough to play this game at various previews on PS5, I've done my own playthrough entirely on PC, and I've even done a little dabbling on the Steam Deck. I have to say there is some performance problems, and while I personally wasn't too bothered by this, it is playable even for an action game, but does leave a lot to be desired. On console, it has a variable frame rate, usually around 30, and I personally prefer a solid 60 FPS for my games, but I've come to accept that not all games on console, especially larger games with big monsters, crazy spells and more, will be able to achieve 60 FPS, even if I wish they could. There are limitations on console, even on PS5, so I can somewhat overlook the 30 FPS average, but the real issue is the variability in the game's frame rate, which is not ideal for an action game or really any game at all. If it was a 30 FPS all the time, I would say it's passable. However, because of the variable frame rate, it will be jarring for many players on console. And then we have PC, and I have to say it is a mixed bag. I get a solid 60 FPS in many areas, but with certain fights and towns bringing this down, and it becomes variable again from around 40. In major cities, it gets even worse with noticeable drops to 20 or 30 frames, and there are settings you can tweak to improve this, like lowering your textures, although this isn't a great option as I like my games to look visually good, especially for a new release in 2024. Bear in mind, I have a 4080, a very high-end PC, so this performance was unexpected, and I am disappointed in the game's performance overall on PC. On Steam Deck, I did try the game out just out of the box to download it, and without any massive tweaks or tricks, unfortunately, it is pretty much unplayable, and as such is not something I can recommend to anyone on Steam Deck. Without some very heavy lifting, time investments to make it look good and play good, the frame rate was just too low to be playable. The graphics are of course stylized, and I will die on this hill. I like the visuals and the style. It's in keeping with the original, and I personally love the aesthetic. I think the landscapes and monsters look great, and I'm happy with it. It could be better though, and I can see why some people would be unhappy with it if they're unfamiliar with the first game's visual style, as this is a new release in 2024 on current gen consoles and PC. It looks nice, but not breathtaking. Overall, I think the game is fantastic. It is a solid action adventure and does have lots of replayability, and there's a ton of fun to be had. The world is lovely, the monsters are very fun to fight, the class vocations are varied and awesome to try out, the questing is thought-provoking but does lack interesting rewards. This is a game I would recommend to someone who likes open world action adventures with lots of discovery and some really cool combat. It's also a game I think people who played the original will love and enjoy. But it's probably not a game I would recommend to someone who's just come off of a Colossus game like Elden Ring and wants something to re-experience that scale, awe and gameplay. In the last year, we've been doing a lot of reviews for the newest and latest games, and we really appreciate your support. We expect Dragon's Dogma 2 might get a mixture of review scores based on the type of gamer and outlet reviewing it. We expect for people who are more hardcore gamers similar to us will likely breeze through the game, and as such reviews from these type of players could be a little harsher due to the overall length of the experience, performance issues, and the lack of enemy variety. However, for more casual players, they might find themselves taking longer to go through the game's story as they get to grips with its various mechanics, leading to an overall longer and potentially more pleasant experience. For advanced players like many of you guys watching, you will likely feel the same as us, with much of the combat and enemies being quite easy overall, especially after the first few hours of gameplay. So depending on the type of gamer reviewing or playing the game, we expect some mixed results from this one because they could have completely different experiences as they go through. Would you guys be interested in us providing a score for our reviews going forward, and is this something that would help you with your purchase choice for a new game? For example, for Dragon's Dogma 2, we would score this a solid 8 out of 10. We would also knock it down to a 7 on console because of the performance, but we did play it on PC ourselves, although again the performance isn't perfect there either. We do however feel it is deserving of an 8 out of 10 despite its shortcomings because of the overall experience and enjoyment of the combat and world. We do feel this score could have been improved a bit with some more variety of enemy types and monsters, some better performance, and if there was overall a little bit more content, as this is an open world action RPG and one that people have waited so long for. With a 30 to 40 hour mark to complete for a gamer like us, including the endgame content, while respectable, it just didn't blow us away. So we've marked this as a 7 on console and 8 on PC because it was a great overall experience and a ton of fun, but just didn't check all of the boxes for us and didn't have the production value that we would have expected and wanted from a new Capcom title. Thank you so much for watching. Comment down below what you think about all of this, and subscribe because we'll have so much more Dragon's Dogma 2 content coming your way very soon.